Today, me and Dr. Orange are going to be talking about the wisdom of Mike Mentzer and whether the heavy-duty training method that he invented is optimal, as he suggests in this book and in all the other books he's written and all the other things he said. I'm going to go over it, not the whole book, just the general ideas of what he said, and we're going to try and see whether there is some truth behind the claim that you could train for only 14 minutes a month and still make the best gains you've ever made in your life. So, I'm a bodybuilder. I like exercise science. This is Dr. Orange. He's going to be the mediator, arbiter, whenever I'm going to say something and I think it's correct, up to date. He will say it for me, as in I believe that the science at the moment suggests what Dr. Orange says, and then if it's my opinion, it's my opinion, and if Dr. Orange is wrong, then shit. But I've also got my dogs here, and they are well versed in the gym. Winston, he's coming on 2 years old, so 14, and in the last year he's put on 4 kilos, doubled his body weight, well done. Penny, she's pretty much run out of gains now. She's maybe 5 kilos. She was about 2 kilos a year ago, so she's still putting some good size. But we'll talk about them later, talk about him later. We'll talk about Mike Mentzer now. So Mike Mentzer, if you don't know, is a golden era bodybuilder, so 70s and 80s. And he was also still training around in Gold's Gym with people in the 90s, but he had a golden era physique. And he was a golden era bodybuilder. He was 5'8", 225 pounds at his peak. Goes into detail about it in the book, lots of pictures of him in the book. And he was the pioneer of the heavy duty training method, which sought to have incredibly high training intensity, but incredibly low training volume. So as he kind of perfected, crafted, changed, researched his heavy duty method, he went from doing multiple sets per exercise, multiple sets per body part, down to doing 1 set per exercise, maybe 2 sets per body part, training from once every 2 days to once every 3 days to once every 4 to 7 days. So you might only be getting 1 workout, 2 workouts a week following the heavy duty training method, because the intensity that he was trying to produce was just so high. And the way he did that wasn't just through straight sets of say 10 reps, 12 reps, or drop sets, or any of those other methods. He was using controlled negatives at the end of sets, having people force reps with him. So big help from a spotter. Doing rest pause, so 10 seconds rest, do a rep, 10 seconds rest, do a rep at the end of the set. Doing isolation, not isolation, is it isotonic, where you just hold the weight still in the full length and part of the movement. So at the end of a bench press, you just hold the weight, end of a squat, hold the weight, end of a bicep curl, hold the weight, do that for many seconds, lower the weight really slowly. He did all kinds of things to turn what would be an intense straight set into a very intense heavy duty set. And that was, his reasoning was, bodybuilders have trained for so long, the only way they can increase their size is as they increase their intensity. The only way to do that is to basically not do straight sets, do heavy duty sets. And his reasoning was, that's going to be more stimulus, more growth, but it's also going to be more intense, so you're going to need more recovery. So you need more time between sessions so that you can train that way to avoid overtraining, which is essentially what Mike Mentzer was all about. He was all about being optimal in the amount you trained and never overtraining. So in lots of his sessions, it does look like he overreaches. It does look like you push yourself past the point of failure, but you recover so much because you barely train at all that you would never really be at risk of overtraining. You'd only ever just overreach, feel a bit sick at the end of a session, have a few days off, come back, train another body part. So that's what heavy duty was. That's who Mike Mentzer was. And the reason I think that this was such a popular thing was because it was so polarizing at the time in the golden era. All the bodybuilders, all of them, they trained in the Gold's gyms, these famous gyms with these Nautilus bits of equipment with the cam and chain system that I think it's John Arthur came up with. The pioneer of Nautilus was creating cam machines so that the resistance profile was varied, as opposed to with a pulley where it's the same throughout the whole movement. The cam would make it parabolic, so it'd be easier at the bottom, easier at the top, heavy in the middle, which is great for muscle building. And everyone used those machines, and they used those machines to great effect. But Arnold trained at that time, the golden era. He is the golden era physique. That is what classic physique is all about, looking like Arnold. And he was the polar opposite of Mike Mentzer in terms of training. He was in the gym for 4 hours a day, doing 20 sets of body part, exercise in the gym twice a day. His volume was through the roof. Mike Mentzer, I think for the time where he had his best physique and he trained sort of like the perfect 300 score, Mr. Universe, the 5th place at the 1980 Mr. Olympia, he was training probably once every 3 to 4, maybe once every 2 to 4 days. So the volume between the two, goats of bodybuilding, golden era, Mike and Arnold, was just night and day. One of them was training all day long, one of them was training for an hour every 3 days. And that's kind of why they were at loggerheads a lot of the competitions. It seemed like there was a lot of rivalry, a bitter rivalry between the two of them, because their training styles were different. The books they were selling said different things. The programs they were, putting their clients through, telling other people to do, were different. So when Mike Mentzer's training with Dorian Yates, he's making Dorian Yates train one type of way. Arnold's training with Franco. Arnold's training with Tom. He's making Tom Platz and Franco Colombo train another kind of way. And they're all growing and competing. But essentially, this book is going to show that they believe that volume is not the good, intensity is the good. They think that volume is less important than intensity. They think too much volume is counterproductive to growth, muscle hypertrophy. So instead, they've lowered the volume, increased the rest, no risk of overtraining, and they've put loads and loads and loads of effort into making the sets as intense as possible. So I think that's the key insights of the book, is train heavy, not train often, and not train a lot. I have never done that. Personally, I've never gone to the gym once, 2 days off, 3 days off, 4 days off, come back, trained again for less than an hour a session. I usually train 5 or 6 exercises, 2 or 3 sets per exercise, to failure on pretty much all of them. And I only train 5 times a week, and that's enough for me to recover. Oh, my dog needs to go out. 1 second. I will let them free. Come on, Winston. So I personally don't have any anecdotal evidence to whether the heavy duty training method works or not. I have never tried it, but since going from training 7 days a week, which is what I did about 2 years ago, to training 6 days a week, which is what I did about 6 months ago, to training 5 days a week, which I do now, I have seen an increase in size, an increase in recovery, an increase in intensity, and I've also decreased my volume, which didn't really come from reading this book. It wasn't sparked by the idea of Mike Mentzer. It was just the idea that as I got bigger and I got stronger, I was lifting more weights, so I needed more recovery, because the amount of weight I'm lifting has gone up dramatically since when I started training 7 days a week, to when I train 6 days a week, I'm stronger, to now I train 5 days a week, I'm stronger. If I ever get even stronger, I'll probably have to cut the volume back again so that I can recover. And that is essentially a boiled down, very light version of heavy duty, whereas heavy duty is an incredible cutback on volume. So probably a quarter of the volume I do, maybe an eighth of the volume most people do, nowhere near the volume that other pros at the time did. So that's why it's so polarizing. That's why it's so talked about. That's why people like it. Some people like it because it works around a work-life balance they've got. the gym sorted in an hour a day, boom, and then they can get on with their lives. So it's got its appeal to lots of people. It's got lots of pros for lots of people, but I think it is a bit unbalanced and a bit not dishonest, but just not correct to say that it is optimal, to say that this low volume is the most optimal. I think the cons of this book, if you like training, you end up not training very much on the heavy duty, which means you're not in the gym, which means that you're not having fun, you're not lifting weights, it just doesn't add up. And the fact that they've kind of not lied, but they've embellished a lot of the details about the kind of progress that people have made on this, it gives me kind of a lot of skepticism around whether people have gained. In this book, somebody said they gained 30 pounds in 3 months. No, I don't think you have, to be honest. Just from cutting down the amount you train, cutting it in half, I could see that happen. But when you quell it down to training, as the most extreme version I read in this was 14 minutes a month, that is just, I just don't quite see it myself. So at the time, Arnold trained with 4-hour workouts, as he said, 4 hours a day. That intensity, to me, seems too high. Not intensity, that volume seems too high. Mike Mentzer's volume seems too low. So I think both of them are onto something. They're both training, they're both making progress, they're both gaining size, but I think that they're both either end of optimal in terms of volume. I think they both train with the right amount of intensity. Maybe not for beginners. Beginners should always start with higher volume, lower intensity, increase the intensity over time, lower the volume over time. That is the curve and slope that you do as a beginner to make your best newbie gains. You start with high volume so that you can get all the stimulus through your body. You can sort out the nerves, you can sort out your form, you can sort out the way that you feel, you can sort out the way that you respond, you can get everything sorted with high volume. And then as you start progressively overloading, lifting more weight, you lower the volume and you increase the intensity. And that's the way it should be done. This, on the other hand, is nowhere near beginner friendly. The heavy duty is too high intensity for any beginner. The exercises it suggests are mainly compound exercises, heavy barbell movements like deadlifts and squats, which are difficult movements to execute, especially for a beginner or somebody who's younger. Those are expert level movements. And I don't see a world in which you could pick up the gym, start the heavy duty training and make the optimal gains, as they say. But I think the reason it worked for so many people is the reason why changing training regimes works for everyone, and that is because it is periodization, which is where you change the rep range, you change the set range, you change the exercises, you change so much about how you train that your body now has to adapt to this new training stimulus, and you have to get bigger than last time, and you progressively overload, and you get stronger on this new regime, and you get bigger on this new regime. That is the way that you make progress in bodybuilding forever, continually. It's periodization. You choose a split that's biased towards, the bench press, the squat, the deadlift. You improve all of those over 6 months. You hit a plateau, you hit a wall. That mesocycle's come to an end. You change, you do another workout, you do another split. It's focused on getting your shoulder press, your lat pull down, your leg extension up. You do that for 6 months, you've put on loads of size. And the best way to put on size and keep putting on size is periodization and progressive overload, which means if you lifted 100 kilos last week, you try 101 this week. Or if you did it for 6 reps last week, you try 7 reps this week. It's gradually adding on little bits of weight, little bits of reps, maybe even slowing down the movement, but not to the point where you're doing, I did 5-second concentric last week, I'm going to do 6-second this week, 7-second next week. But you don't progressively overload with things like that. You don't progressively overload with how little rest you have. I wouldn't recommend that, as in you did 2 minutes rest, you're going to try 1.5 minutes, even though that would be eventually the only way you're going to be able to keep progressing is if you have no rest at all and you just superset everything. So those are the two things you don't progressively overload. You overload the reps, the weight, the intensity, You can do drop sets, you can do all kinds of different things, but progressive overload should mainly be about getting bigger and stronger, because when you get stronger, you get bigger, because bigger muscles lift more weight. It's just the rules. It's just the way it works. And that is the kind of training that everyone who did heavy duty, everyone who did Arnold style of training, everyone who did anyone's ever style of training and implemented those regimes, they would have implemented progressive overload. They would have inevitably got used to it, and then they'd have started lifting more weight than last time, and they'd have started putting on size. So there is no way you can say that this doesn't work, because any training where you progressively overload and you've got adequate intensity, adequate volume, you will make progress. But the only thing that I think this lacks is adequate volume, because if I get Mr. Dr. Orange here, and I get my volume and muscle hypertrophy study, suggested that high weekly training volumes were associated with greater muscle hypertrophy, particularly when the sets were taken close to failure. So the total workload of lifting, workload being volume, was conducive to hypertrophy. Increasing the volume, they saw people who did more volume got more results in certain studies, which were done about 5 years ago. So a lot more up to date than whatever studies Mike Mentzer was referencing. And then in terms of intensity, they saw that training with weights between 60 and 80% of your 1 rep max were effective for muscle hypertrophy. So you can imagine if you trained at a volume with a weight that was 60 to 80% of your 1 rep max, I don't know, say you can bench 100 kilos, you do a set of 80, you get 6, and then next set you can't get 6, you can no longer do 80% of your 1 rep max, you go down to 60% of your 1 rep max, you do 60, you do your 6 to 8 reps, and then when you can no longer perform with that weight, you are now doing 50% of your 1 rep max. That is it. You are done. You have done your volume. You have trained intense. You have done it. That is where I'm seeing the 2 different studies that have been done on workload and intensity go. It is the 60 to 80% of your 1 rep max optimal for hypertrophy. You train there with as many reps as you can, high intensity, close to failure, maybe 1 rep in reserve, no reps in reserve, but we're not going past that point. It's quite hard when you look at the bell curve of training intensity and how close you are to failure. Lots of people who were kind of all over the I want to train super intense all the way to failure every session, they see the curve and they see as you get closer you get more and more muscle, and they just took that graph, I think everyone's seen it, and they ran with it and they said super intense is the best. But it does actually fall off at the very end of that graph. You can see that when you train past failure, you overreach, it clearly is not as conducive, it is not as optimal for hypertrophy as training to failure, not past failure. So that's as far as I could read, that's as far as Dr. Orange could read. As far as reps, if you're lifting 60% of your 1 rep max and you can get more than 12 reps, is your 1 rep max your 1 rep max anymore? Probably not. As in, if you can do 60 for 13, I'm pretty sure you can probably do 100 for maybe more than 1. I'm not sure, but it sounds a bit iffy. If you can do more than 12 reps in a set, you should up the weight. Simple as that. Otherwise you're just doing cardio at that point. You're just wasting all your energy on doing reps. Junk volume is the one thing that Mike Mentzer wanted you to avoid. It's the one thing everyone needs to avoid, and that's just flapping around in the gym with weights that aren't heavy enough to challenge you, weights that aren't heavy enough to challenge you, don't change you. The 2, I think this is something Dr. Orange can say, the 2 main elements of hypertrophy are metabolic stress and mechanical tension. So as long as you're not throwing weight around, you're actually flexing the weight upwards with the muscles you want to train, and you are metabolically stressing, as in it is challenging, it is creating the byproducts of metabolic stress like lactic acid and all these other stress hormones and kind of reactions to, oh, hello Winston, to training, then you will be achieving hypertrophy. If you train too light, it's not going to be stressful enough, it's not going to challenge you enough. Even if you control the weight, you still get that mechanical tension. You still do, you know, at least a second on concentric, second on eccentric. You're not throwing it. Hello. You don't need to go super slow on the way up. The eccentric, I've seen in this book especially, they talk about controlling the eccentric part of the movement, as in the lifting part. You do that slowly. Now, I wouldn't say you're supposed to do it slowly to the point where you're counting, you know, 1, 2, 3 on a bicep curl, 1, 2, 3 on a bicep curl. You should be flexing your bicep the whole way through the movement, and the weight should just be lifted through the action of you flexing your arm. If that's really slowly, that's really slowly. If that's quite quickly, that's quite quickly. Like, so when you're on a leg extension, you're not just putting your foot in front of you, you're flexing your quad and you're letting it do its job, moving your patellar tendon, boom, you're straightening your leg. You're not just kicking, you are flexing your quad and letting that. That's how you're supposed to train. I don't know why people don't train like that, but you'll see it all the time where people come off of sets and there's no fatigue. They haven't really done the muscle. They've just thrown the weight around. On lat pull down, you're just leaning back. You're not squeezing your lat and letting it drive your hand down. So in that regard, Mike Mentzer's right. Most bodybuilders are right in this. You do need to control the weight. On the concentric, the eccentric portion, I don't see the legitimate reason why you'd need to count that. You just don't throw the weight. Exactly. You just don't throw the weight. Yeah, exactly. All right. What you shouting at me for? Don't let me talk into a camera. You need to weigh in. You need to weigh in and give your opinion. Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think Dr. Orange is wrong? No, right. It is not necessary. Count the eccentric. You do that, you control the eccentric. You can control the concentric with a number. You can do a 3-second on the way down if you want, if you like doing that. If you don't like doing that, you don't have to do that. Holding the weight at the fully lengthened, so for like an isometric or isotonic, I can't remember which one, where you just hold the weight still. So at like the top of a bicep curl, you hold the weight there for a second and then you lower it. I can see why you do that. That could increase the amount of tension. I don't think time under tension is really that relevant to training. As long as you control the weight, you shouldn't be progressively overloading by doing gradually slower and slower sets. You'd just be in the gym all day, all year. So I don't think that's not the relevant part of training. But the parts that Mike Mentzer is correct about are the control of the weight, the control of not overtraining, the control of the intensity. All of those things are spot on. It's just the volume. They have clearly fear-mongered people that volume is bad, and the heavy-duty training method seems to be volume bad, intensity good. Mike Mentzer's kind of polar to Arnold's, which was like volume is good, intensity is good. And I think neither of them are wrong, because clearly they both made amazing progress, built amazing physiques doing that. But I don't think either of them are wholly right in saying one way is optimal or both ways are optimal. I think it's like, you know, a bell curve, and you've got Mike Mentzer on one end of the scale and Arnold on the other end of the scale, and it's like Arnold's definitely overtraining, Mike's definitely undertraining. You could go somewhere in the middle of this curve, but it is entirely, let me get Mr. Orange, it is entirely up to individual variability. That is what Mr. Orange would like to say. Everything that works will work differently for different people. What works for me might not work for you. What worked for Mike might not work for Arnold. What worked for Arnold might not work for Mike. What worked for Mike might not work for you. What worked for Arnold might not work for you. Who knows? That is the way individual variability works. Reps, sets, volume, intensity, we all respond to it differently. We are all different genetically. So there is no way of saying that one way of training is the holy grail and the most optimal way of training. There will be a most optimal way for you, and I believe that that can be quite easily found by doing constant progressive overload and periodization of your workouts. So you'll go in maybe 6-month mesocycles. So that would be 2 different kind of types of training in a year. You know, maybe you could do 3-4 months, I don't know, 3 different styles, 4 months of training per year, where you do different rep ranges. You focus on progressively overloading different exercises, different heavy exercises, you focus on training intensely. I think that's the best way to train. And in terms of recovery, once you finish putting the work in the gym, you don't grow in the gym. You break your muscles down in the gym. Mr. Orange could definitely say this. You do not grow in the gym. You come out the gym smaller than you went in. Even though you've got a pump and you're full of blood, your muscles are now technically broken. They are technically smaller. They are technically weaker. All these micro tears you have caused doing your lovely controlled weights, concentric, however you've done it, you have damaged these muscles and now they need to recover. They need to repair. Muscles are made of protein. Protein is made of amino acids. I think Mr. Orange can say that. I think I can say that confidently, that the only way you can recover is if you don't train. You can't recover when you do train. You can't do biceps Monday and expect your biceps to recover when you train them Tuesday. They're still broken from Monday. You're beating a dead horse. You need recovery. You need this 48-hour window, I'd say, is where we're looking at. As I say, individual variability. Some people might not recover in 48 hours. Some people might recover in 24 hours. Some people might recover in 12 hours, and they can train their biceps every day, every day, every day. I doubt it, but some people can. Some people do. Some people do, as Mike Mentzer started doing. That's how he started off training. He did full body 3 days a week, and that might not give you that 48-hour window every session for recovery from one muscle group to another. As in, you don't need to do back and have 48 hours off before you do chest. You need to do back and have 48 hours off before you do back again. I think that's kind of something that the heavy duty book just completely gets wrong, in my opinion. Maybe in Mr. Orange's opinion. I haven't done enough Mr. Orange research on that. But I think when they say that you need to recover your entire body, all of those processes need to be reset from, say, training your legs. You train your legs and you can't train anything tomorrow. You are done. You can't even do biceps. You can't even do chest. You can't do back. You can't do shoulders because you did legs yesterday, and your body needs to recover, not just your legs. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that can be true, because modern bodybuilding is all about these training splits where you do 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, or you do 6 days on, 1 day off. You do none of these splits seem to support anything like, I've done arms today, I can't do anything tomorrow, I can't do anything the day after. The amount, the training frequency of heavy duty doesn't make sense to me. It just seems like you're leaving gains on the table. It seems like you're leaving workouts on the table. I don't see how. Yes, you've caused stress to your body and central nervous system when you train certain heavy compound lifts. You do your deadlifts and your squats. You definitely can't train your central nervous system the day after that, 2 days after that. So you can't do squats for leg day, the next day deadlifts for back day. That's fair enough. You probably can't do bent over rows for back day, the next day do squats for legs, because anything where there's pressure through your spine, you are weakening your central nervous system, and it will need to recover. So maybe, just maybe, the 3 days in between the sessions that they are doing is because they are training so intensely and they are putting so much stress through their central nervous system. But I don't think that's possible, because not all of the workouts, not all the exercises that Mike Mentzer selected put stress through the spine, the central nervous system at all. Some of them were just biceps. I remember there was the chest and back split, I think it is. But the chest day was like dips, incline press, incline flies, and a couple other things. There was no heavy bent over rows, heavy deadlifts. I didn't see any reason why you couldn't do that chest day, which did look quite fun. And then the next day do a leg day. I don't know why, but it just seems like Mike Mentzer is scared of doing one exercise, one muscle group one day, another muscle group another day, in fear of overtraining, which is essentially what he does not want to do. He does not want to waste his time. He does not want to train when he doesn't have to. He wants to train when he's fully recovered. But I personally see that. Maybe Mr. Orange sees that as well, as leaving gains on the table. I think the frequency you train each muscle, I think you can definitely train each muscle group once a week. Definitely once a week. Let's just put the baseline there. You can definitely train every muscle group once a week. Okay? There's no reason why you need to do legs once every 2 weeks, because I've heard Tom Platz say that, and some people they're like, no, Tom Platz hit squats so hard he couldn't do them. He couldn't do them the next week. He had to wait a week after that. Maybe. Who knows if that's true anymore? That might have been true for him, as we say, individual variability. But I do not see a world in which I train squats on Monday. I cannot train squats on the next Monday, the Monday of the next week. Even when I go all the way to failure and I end up having to bail out and drop the bar, and then I go and I smash my leg extensions, and I go and I smash my hamstring curls, I go and I smash my RDLs. I train very intensely. I train to failure. I train beyond failure on certain muscles, on certain exercises, especially isolation exercises. I love to do drop sets, forced reps, cheat reps even at the end of the set, half reps, quarter reps. Just absolutely send it out on isolations. I wouldn't recommend heavy duty style of training for anything that's a compound exercise. I don't see that as safe at all, especially barbell compound exercises, free weight compound exercises. I don't think you should be doing quarter rep squats, forced rep squats, I don't know, all of these crazy things with a bar on your back. I think with compound exercises, barbell compound exercises, free weight compound exercises, not stuff like machine compound exercises, you should basically go to the point of choosing a muscle, and when that muscle's done, that exercise is done. So for me, for squats, I squat for my quads. I don't squat for my posterior chain. I squat for my quads. I'll put my heels on elevation, or I'll wear squat shoes, and I will go until I feel like I'm starting to lean forward. The form is breaking down. It is no longer optimal for quads anymore. This is not squat optimal quad form. So I say fuck it, and I will put the bar back, even if it looks like I've got 6 reps in the tank. When my quads are cooked, the squats are done. That's the way it should be. If you're training deadlifts and you're a bodybuilder, the fatigue to stimulus ratio is way off. When you're training heavy duty intensity on compound exercises, the fatigue to stimulus ratio is way off. The risk to reward is way off, to be honest. I think you're definitely going to see people ripping muscles if they do squats to complete mechanical failure to the point where they need to do a good morning to get the bar up. You're going to see people hurting their backs. You're going to see people hurting everything. And of course, you're going to need to do lots of recovery if you overtrain and overreach in that way. If you did squats to complete mechanical failure, not just to the failure of a muscle that you choose, like me, I'll choose the quads, as in you go to the point where you physically cannot put the bar down and back up again, you are damaging a lot more than the muscles you're trying to grow. You're putting a lot more stress on your central nervous system than you need to, and that's why he is overtraining and he is putting too much force through his CNS to recover, to train tomorrow. I'm sure you could train complete mechanical failure on squats and do arms the next day. I don't think there's any session you can do where the next day you can't come in and have a decent arm day or a decent shoulder day. As long as you're not loading through your central nervous system, you can do seated curls, you can do all kinds of things, but you will not be loading your central nervous system because you've already absolutely caked it by doing, I would consider, the wrong form of compound exercise. Compound exercise should be done to failure, but failure of the form, not complete failure of the ability to get another rep. You can go to complete failure, you can't get any more reps on isolation exercise. Brilliant example is leg extensions. I think everyone's seen videos of Tom Platz doing leg extensions where his form falls apart, but he keeps on going, he keeps on getting reps, and he goes well beyond the point of failure, forced reps, cheated reps, whatever you want to call it, on isolation exercises. That's fine, okay? You might not be able to walk the next day, you might have really cooked your quads, but you have not cooked your central nervous system. So you're going to have to limp to the gym, get carried to the gym. You might even need to take a day off after a good leg day. That might be the way. You need to go put the leg days in at the end of the days. You do back one day, chest one day, legs, day off, go again. That might have to be where you put those rest days in. We're not sure. Individual variability. Some people, they can go push-pull legs, rest. Some people can go push-pull legs, rest, push-pull legs rest. They need, an every 4 cycle, not an every 7. I personally do chest and back, legs, rest, chest and back, shoulders and arms, legs, rest. At the moment, my current training split is biased to recovery. It's biased to the certain chest exercises I do, the certain back exercises, leg exercises, arm exercises. I am progressively overloading in all of them. So that's where those 2 rest days come in. I am pushing myself pretty hard on those leg days. Squats, as I say, the heavy compound exercises I do, the only barbell compound exercise I do is squat and occasionally deadlift. But I do deadlift on a leg day because I think I need the rest day afterwards. So even if I'm engaging my back a bit when I do the squats on the legs, I still get the nice day off afterwards. So my split does not resemble the heavy duty split. It does not resemble an Arnold split. It doesn't really resemble a Tom Platz split. It's my own thing. That's what everyone else wants to do. You can copy me if you want. You can write down what I did. I said I did chest and back, legs, rest, chest and back, shoulders and arms, legs, rest. That's 5 days a week. You get to choose whether you want to have a Wednesday for a rest day, Sunday for a rest day is the way I do it at the moment. But if you did chest and back, shoulders and arms, legs, rest, you could have Thursday as the rest day. Friday, Saturday, you do chest and back, legs, Sunday, the rest again. So it just doesn't matter really. I don't think it matters unless you have other commitments and like work. You shouldn't be necessarily stuck to doing a 7-day, every muscle group, a certain amount of times in a week because it fits. Not every Monday needs to be this day. Not every Tuesday needs to be this day. Your body doesn't know what the calendar of the days of the week are really in terms of recovery. You might need to have a training split that goes all over the place. Monday will be a different thing every time. But as long as you get adequate volume in, adequate intensity in, you control all the weights, you go to failure on your isolations, you go to positive failure on your compounds, you should make progress. Progressive overload, periodization, it's all you need. I think lots of it is covered properly. It makes sense properly. Recovery is proper. Overtraining is a real thing. You need to avoid it. Overreaching is something you'll definitely do on this training program, heavy duty, but you're definitely not going to overtrain because your training frequency is so low. Now, as far as the most modern bodybuilding is concerned, it is all about if you train hard, you need to rest hard, but you don't need to rest 4 days a week. You need to rest maybe 1 or 2. For different people, different things. Some people, they don't need any rest. They have incredible recovery. They train 7 days a week, every day of the week, every week of the year. I did that for 3 or 4 years on the trot. I remember Christmas Day was chest day. 2 years in a row. Don't think I hit bench press PRs on Christmas Day, chest day. There was no one there to spot you. It was a bit of a weird one. But during lockdown, still trained every day of the week. Built a home gym in my garage. There is nothing really, if you put your mind to it, that can stop you from training every day a week if you like doing it. If it works for you, if you're a beginner, it's definitely going to work for you because anything works for a beginner. Newbie gains are real. They are a cheat code. You will see people put on 50 pounds in a year. You'll see people put on 40 pounds in a year. All of these crazy anecdotal people, you've got friends, you've got PTs, you've got everyone who says, in my first year, I did this. None of them are lying. They might be embellishing it, but trust me, the newbie gains you can make in a year are insane. No matter how you train, whether you chose heavy duty or you chose a more, middle of the bell curve, not Arnold, not Mike, somewhere in the middle level of volume with adequate intensity for a beginner. Obviously, that's going to be much lower than someone who's advanced. You will make gains. You will make the best gains of your life in that first year of training, that first 2-3 years of training. It doesn't matter what you do. You will keep making gains. That is the way it works. I think Dr. Orange can agree with that. I think I can agree with that. I think everyone can agree that the first years are the best years of your life when you're in the gym. Probably the best years of your life, not even relative to the gym. The first years you start picking up the gym. are going to be the best ones of your life. You're going to feel great. The endorphins you get from making the progress you make, it's addictive. It's why people will train 7 days a week, even when it's suboptimal, because they love doing it. You love training. People love to train. They don't really care if they could get more gains out of 6 days a week. They like training 7 days a week. Hey, some people, they train 4 days a week. They don't care if they could get more gains doing 5 days a week, because they like doing 4. That's the way it works. Some people work manual labor. They do other heavy lifting throughout their day. They do other, some people's jobs require them to get 20,000 steps a day without even incorporating cardio if they want to do cardio, or the exercises if they want to do them. Some people train 3 days on, 3 days off, 3 days on, 3 days off, because they work 3 days on, 3 days off. So the 3 days they're not working in work, they're training in the gym. The 3 days they're not training in the gym, they're in work. People do all kinds of different things. Individual variability. It fits around your life. It works for you. That's the way it works. That's the way it goes. And I think specifically stuff like heavy duty, stuff like what Arnold does, it doesn't take in the individual variability. It doesn't leave any room for periodization. It's their way or the highway. Do this all the way until you win your show. But I think you need to switch it up every 6 months, every 4 months. Whenever you stagnate, whenever you hit plateaus, you hit walls, you need to change how you train. You could put in another rest day and do a different split. You could stay training 6 days a week, just do a different split. I think lots of people have been training for years and years and years in a row, just doing a bro split. Once a week on every muscle group. Probably skipping legs, to be honest. Most people who do every muscle group twice a week will always do legs once a week, and I think that's fine. I do legs twice a week. I've done legs 3 times a week. I think 3 times a week is probably the limit for legs. I've squatted twice a week. I think squatting twice a week is probably the limit for squats. I don't see a world in which you can squat 3 times a week or every day of the week and squat to failure. Not complete failure, but we've talked about that. I don't think you can do that every day. I think you can definitely do that twice a week. If you love squatting, you can probably squat, on a Wednesday, have a rest day, do another couple training exercises, and then squat on a Saturday. But as I said, it doesn't need to be to do with the days of the week. You can squat on any day, have a few days off, squat again, have a few days off, squat again. It doesn't need to be confined to the 7 days a week, but it often seems like the training programs we make are, because that's the way it works. We want Sundays off, we want Saturdays off, because that's when we want to be out doing other things or in work, So I think the takeaway of this, the main conclusion, is that the modern bodybuilding and the Dr. Orange science supports. The only thing it supports is periodization will get you results. Progressive overload will get you results. Training with weights 60 to 80% of your 1 rep max will be effective for muscle hypertrophy. Rep ranges, doesn't matter if you like to work in 1 rep range or another, it's individual. So there is no golden rep range. And of course, volume is important for muscles. But once the chicken is cooked, once you can no longer operate 60% of your 1 rep max on an exercise, you have reached the limit of your volume. You do not need to do lightweight, baby weight, mini reps, none of that. Once you're done, you're done. I think it's quite obvious to some people when they're overreaching in their training. For me, I'll do 2 sets of bench and I'm done. I'm off, I'm gone. I'll do 2 sets of heavy cable press and I'm off, I'm done. I'll do 2 sets of lat pull downs, off and done. 2 sets of squats, off and done. Because I know when I'm not, if I can do, let's think of an example. I can do 260 on the lat pull down. 270 pounds. Don't know what that is in kilos, but it's 250 pounds with a 10 kilo plate. I can do that for 8 reps underhand. So if I do that for a set and I say, do it again, and I get 6, there's no way I'm getting 6 on the next set. That's me done. I like to train in a 6 to 8 rep range. 270 for 8, 270 for 6, done. Off. That's the way it should be. When you're done, you're done. When the chicken's cooked, you need to know it. And I think that's what people need to do. They need to stop overtraining with junk volume. They need to start recovering properly. They could definitely recover harder. You can always train hard, but you do need to recover hard. And the way you do that is you get your good sleep, you get your good food, you take your creatine, you take your multivitamins, and in the case of Mike Mentzer, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and every other pro, you take a shitload of steroids that enhance your recovery to the point where training 4 hours a day is not even going to tickle you because you are on, as people have recounted, Arnold was on steroids by the handful, by the bucket load. My brother was doing, I think, people said there was Austrians. Everyone did 2 tabs of D-bol at 25 meg each, so that's 50 meg in the golden days. And people said that the Austrians, i.e. Arnold, were doing 3 or 4. So he was doing shitloads of gear. Mike Mentzer, I haven't really read up on personal people talking about him doing gear. I don't think Dr. Orange can say that Arnold definitely did 100 meg of D-bol a day. I don't think there's any proof of that. He definitely went out and said that he only did 200 meg of test a week, which is obviously bullshit. I mean, that's just people lying to save face and say that it was all the hard work. Buy my book, train how I did. And that is kind of the sad story of it, the polarizing nature of saying things like training 4 hours a day or training 14 minutes a month is because they've made such tremendous physiques that you've almost kind of like, the burden of proof is like, yeah, they've done it, they have built the physique doing that, but they are also doing things that you are not. They are taking things that you are not. And then when it comes to telling people about it, they are just lying. And that will kind of make it sound like the training is more important than it is, because for people to say that they put on 25 pounds of muscle in a year, but they don't tell you that they were on steroids, and they tell you it was instead because they did this split, buy my book, buy my coaching, you'll achieve these results. Arnold did it. I'm sorry. I don't know why he did it. It really kind of bugs me because I did like him, but then he lied and he kind of toned down and washed down the amount of steroids he said he did. So did Tom Platz. I really like Tom Platz. I really like the way Tom Platz trains legs especially. I'd try and copy that. But when he says that he's only ever spent $300 on an Olympia level cycle, you just know he's lying. He's lying. Like Liver King was on 10,000 pounds a month worth of steroids, people calculated it. And he didn't even have an Olympia caliber physique. He was just a really big guy with a beard. And I mean, you're going to tell me that Tom Platz, best legs arguably in history, 300 pounds a cycle. It's just bullshit. But as far as that's concerned, it doesn't matter that the people have made the results that they've made on gear, not on gear, natural or not natural. The results you will make will depend on the amount of effort you put in, the amount of hard work you put in, the amount of food you eat, the amount of food you force down. Who knows? Maybe you've got absolutely no desire to eat food. You're not hungry, but you still need to get big. You still do need to force the food down. It doesn't matter. Your results will come from your own individual variability to the rep ranges, to the recovery, to the volume that you can handle, the intensity you can handle. That will depend on people, but I'd just say the best way to find what works best for you is to do periodization and keep on switching it up, and you'll just keep on making progress as long as you keep progressively overloading. Just makes sense. I think Mr. Orange can agree with that the best way to make gains is to progressively overload and periodize. I think I've said that probably a million times now. But that's how I've kept making gains. Even though I've been training in 5.5 years, I still make gains. I think there's certainly been plateaus, there's certainly been injuries when I've overtrained and not had enough rest, not had enough recovery, not had enough rest days. Yep, I've hurt myself lots of times in the gym. But if you recover enough and you train enough, you should get pretty big. I think that's everything we've got to say. I don't think Dr. Orange has anything else. Just quickly have a read of all these bloody science what are they called? Meta-analyses and individual, bloody hell, study, research explored, study explained, study indicated, study suggests, study, yeah, I mean, the hypothesis behind most of these studies is kind of not like written out in black and white, is heavy duty the best way to build muscle? Nobody does, scientific studies aren't based on like one person's kind of word for things, but the overarching support is not in favor of this kind of super low volume, not in favor of Arnold's super high volume. It's kind of in favor of the middle of the curve, probably somewhere around 6 to 10 sets per body part. I think that's probably where we're going to leave it, 6 to 10 sets, because I think the best way to look at it would be on the side of a medicine bottle. If it said take between 1 and 50 servings, that's much too bigger of a margin for you to, what, 1 to 50? Like, just go straight in the middle, take 25, that might be way too much for you. Go straight to the end 50, that might be too much to you. Do 1, you might not get anything. So I think it's just finding little periods of doing certain amounts between these upper and lower bounds, and definitely gradually narrowing in, this is too much for me, this is too little for me, and gradually honing in a little sweet spot where you can dance around and make the best gains of your life all the time. That's probably the best way to do it. That's probably Dr. Orange's take on it. I don't think there's going to be people who say Dr. Orange says Mike's right. I definitely don't think there's people who are going to say Dr. Orange says Arnold's right. I think if they were to do proper, cross-reference studies, they do a year of somebody training heavy duty, a year of somebody training like Arnold, and they get the same person to somehow, identical twins. One of them does Mike's, one of them does Arnold's. I think the person who does Mike's would probably be bigger. I mean, I don't know if that's a full takeaway, but I think Mike trained better than Arnold. I think overtraining is probably worse than undertraining, because if something's worth doing, it's worth overdoing is one saying. If something's worth doing, it's worth doing a little bit is another saying. But I think the best saying is, if something is worth doing, it is worth doing well. And that's what you should do. You should train well, you should train properly, you should train to failure, you should recover, you should get big, you should keep getting big, you should keep eating food.